Imagine a foggy Monday morning, maybe 2030. You know the feeling. You're typically stuck in just awful traffic, maybe 2 hours. But today, you step into this compact vehicle, type your destination into an app, simple enough, and then you watch as the wings fold up and the car lifts silently away from like a rooftop vertiport. Below, highway drivers stare, jaws probably a little agape, and the city's sounds change, right? New rules emerge for this whole airborne ballet, and with them, a fresh set of anxieties. Because that single liftoff, it carries centuries of dreams, huge corporate wagers, intense policy battles, and, well, very human questions about control and risk and trust. This isn't just some futuristic fantasy anymore. It feels real now. Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we unpack the most fascinating topics of our time. Today, we're taking on flying cars. Yeah, a concept that's been, stuck in science fiction for so long, but is now, well, tangibly entering our reality. We've compiled a stack of articles, research papers, industry insights, all sorts of stuff. And our mission today is really to cut through the noise, distill the essential knowledge, and give you a comprehensive understanding of this pretty revolutionary technology.
Yeah, and what's striking, I think, is how this technology isn't just about, the engineering breakthroughs, amazing as they are. It's poised to fundamentally reshape our mental models of mobility, status, even how we interact with public space. It's huge. We're going to try and give you a shortcut today, a way to understand the entire landscape, the history, which is fascinating, the psychology, the societal implications, the very real controversies brewing, and, importantly, a clear picture of where this innovation is actually headed. Our mission is to explore not just what flying cars are, but why they matter to you and what implications they hold for our shared future.
Okay, let's return to that vivid image for a moment. That person in 2030, seamlessly transitioning from ground traffic to the skies above their city. It really encapsulates so much of what we're talking about, doesn't it? That blend of the everyday routine, like typing a destination into an app. With truly cutting-edge technology, you're not just seeing a vehicle take flight, you're witnessing a whole different way of life begin to unfold. A shift in how we commute, how we experience our cities, how we even, conceive of moving through the world. It's such a powerful visual, right? It's been fueling our collective imagination for generations.
Indeed. And that single liftoff, as simple as it might seem in a story, it carries with it just an immense weight. There's a dense layer of human ambition and technological struggle behind it. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it really represents the culmination of a centuries-long cultural dream. For so long, the idea of personal flight was, confined to myths like Icarus soaring too close to the sun. Then it moved into the speculative pages of science fiction, Jules Verne, the Jetsons, all that. Now we're seeing a tangible snapshot of a future built not just on those experiments and myths, but on crucial modern decisions. Decisions about regulation, about innovative design, and ultimately about public acceptance. All of these things are converging. Right now, at this pivotal moment, transforming a long-held fantasy into, a very near-term reality. It's a testament to human ingenuity, absolutely, but it's also a profound challenge to our collective ability to integrate such a radical change into, the fabric of daily life.
Okay, let's unpack this journey then. This dream of personal aerial vehicles, it didn't just appear overnight. That's clear. It has a surprisingly long and winding history, stretching back much further than many people might imagine. It's not just some post-jet age fantasy. The roots actually go deep into the very origins of modern transportation itself. It's fascinating.
Yeah. One striking aspect here is that the idea of combining road and air travel truly emerged as aviation and automobile technologies matured, in parallel. We're talking the late 19th and early 20th centuries. As soon as people had reliable personal cars, and then boom, reliable aircraft shortly after. It was almost inevitable that visionary inventors would start imagining hybrids,
Yeah.
The human desire to overcome the limitations of ground travel, think mud, ruts, slow speeds, while also bringing the convenience of personal door-to-door transport to the skies. That was an incredibly powerful, almost gravitational driver for innovation. Just makes sense people would try it.
And these early ideas weren't just abstract concepts, were they? We're talking about actual physical prototypes and attempts, even a century ago. It's kind of wild to think about the perseverance involved.
Yeah.
What were some of those very first, maybe kind of clumsy steps?
Oh, absolutely. Actual machines. One of the earliest documented roadable aircraft experiments, which really embodies this initial struggle, was the Curtiss Autoplane from 1917. Conceived by Glenn Curtiss, who was a huge pioneer in both aviation and motorcycles, interestingly. It was essentially an aluminum fuselage with 3 wings, believe it or not, that could attach to a Model T Ford chassis.
A Model T, wow. Yeah. But it never achieved sustained flight. It only managed hops. which is a term that just vividly highlights the initial difficulty, right? Safely transitioning between road and air. The sheer bulk, the complexity of detaching and reattaching the wings, and just the conflicting demands. Lightweight for flight versus robust for the road. Those presented foundational challenges right from the start. It signaled that while the vision was powerful, the tech, the material science, it wasn't quite ready to seamlessly perform two vastly different functions.
So right away, inventors slammed into those fundamental engineering dilemmas. Weight versus lightness, strength versus agility. Yet despite those struggles, it seems the idea really took off in the public imagination, even if the machines themselves weren't quite ready for prime time.
Precisely. The period spanning the 1930s through the 1950s, that became an era of sporadic prototypes and intense public fascination. You'd often see them in newsreels. You can picture the grainy black and white footage, sometimes accompanied by dramatic and, occasionally tragic accidents.
Oof. Yeah, I bet.
These mishaps, while obviously unfortunate, vividly showed the inherent dangers and the immense technical challenges of trying to make these things work reliably and safely. But despite these setbacks, or maybe even because of the daring involved, this era cemented the car that flies in popular culture. From comic strips and pulpy sci-fi magazines to, the ultimate utopian vision of the Jetsons in the 1960s. The idea of personal aerial mobility became this powerful symbol of the future. It was this constant presence in media that kept the dream alive, really, even when the engineering was seriously lagging behind the imagination.
Okay, let's fast forward a bit. It seems like things got serious again in the new millennium. After decades of relative quiet, what sparked that renewed interest and the progress?
Yeah, the 2000s and 2010s saw a significant rekindling of efforts, this time driven by serious engineering, huge advancements in computing power, and renewed investment, both private and public. Programs like DARPA's Transformer program, for instance. Now, that was ultimately canceled in 2013, but it really pushed the boundaries of what was possible, specifically for tactical mobility for military uses.
Right, the military often pushes tech forward.
Exactly. And simultaneously, you had startups like Terrafugia emerging, seriously pursuing the roadable aircraft concept for civilians. Their early transition prototype successfully flew in 2009. That marked a tangible step forward from the earlier hops. It demonstrated a persistent belief that with modern materials, computational design, the dream was finally, maybe, within reach. It showed industry was prepared to pour serious resources into overcoming those historical engineering hurdles.
And then we hit the late 2010s and the early 2020s, and this is where it gets really interesting, because it feels like something fundamentally shifted. It moved beyond just flying cars into a whole new category of vehicle, right?
It truly did. This is the era of eVTOL. That stands for Electric Vertical Takeoff and Landing Designs. And that redefined the entire field. We moved beyond just roadable aircraft to dedicated air taxis and what's now broadly termed Advanced Air Mobility, or AAM.
AAM, okay, so what does that cover?
Well, AAM encompasses a wide range of new aviation concepts. Passenger-carrying eVTOL, sure, but also things like drone delivery, other automated or semi-automated aerial services in urban and suburban environments. The focus really shifted from a car that could also fly to an aircraft specifically designed for efficient urban air travel. Though some still retain, limited road capability, companies worldwide progress rapidly from concept to test flights, actively seeking certification from aviation authorities like the FAA here or EASA in Europe. This period is marked by the recognition that electric propulsion offered just unprecedented possibilities: quieter, more efficient, potentially distributed vertical flight. Making that urban integration seem far more viable than ever before. It was a game changer.
And we're starting to see real-world proof points now, not just concepts or test flights behind closed doors. We're talking actual demonstrable progress people can see.
Indeed. The years 2021 to 2024 brought us tangible demonstrators and some limited certifications. We saw ClimeVision's Aircar. That's a true transforming vehicle. It famously completed inter-airport flights in 2021. It literally transformed from a car to a plane on the tarmac and then took off. That got huge public attention, a powerful proof of technical feasibility for its specific design.
That's the one I saw the videos of. Looked incredible.
Right. But simultaneously, companies like PAL-V prepared for limited production of their gyrocopter-style roadable craft. Different approach. And Droni even achieved FAA airworthiness certification in 2023 for a certain class of their vehicle. These are significant markers, yes, technical feasibility, regulatory engagement, but it's important to frame them correctly. These are still niche or limited scale developments, not mass consumer rollout yet, but vital stepping stones, absolutely.
But the biggest, most monumental step, the one that really signals a shift from experimental to
actionable seem to have just happened very recently.
Absolutely, a truly foundational change. The October 2024 FAA Final Rule for Powered Lift. This is monumental, a landmark. This rule established a brand new aircraft category specifically for eVTOLs and air taxis. And this is a huge deal because it's the first major new aircraft category since helicopters were established way, way back in 1940.
Wow, since 1940, that's huge.
It really is. This powered lift designation is groundbreaking because it acknowledges that these vehicles, they don't operate purely like a traditional airplane or a helicopter. They sort of combine vertical takeoff and landing with winged flight capabilities. It's a hybrid operation. So this new category finally gives innovators a clear, defined regulatory pathway for certification, for pilot training, and ultimately for commercial operations. It's the framework that moves these vehicles from experimental prototypes to legitimate, certifiable aircraft ready for the national airspace system. And, if we delve into some lesser-known historical facts, it becomes even clearer why we've only now reached this point. Remember those brutal engineering trade-offs we mentioned?
Yeah, the weight versus lightness thing.
Exactly. Many early flying car efforts failed, not because flight itself was impossible, but because the compromises required were just too severe. The weight, the durability, the crashworthiness demanded for road use, think. Robust chassis, crash structures, safety glass, all that stuff often made them impossibly heavy and inefficient for flight. Compared to separate, optimized cars and planes, trying to be good at both meant they ended up being, well, poor at both. The engineering challenge wasn't just about combining technologies, it was about reconciling fundamentally conflicting requirements.
So it really wasn't a lack of vision or even a lack of trying back then, but maybe a profound limitation in the material science or propulsion systems, stuff that couldn't handle those conflicting demands effectively a century ago. It really underlines how much modern advances like batteries and lightweight composites are truly enabling this now.
Precisely. And here's another interesting historical thread you might not know. DARPA and various military programs repeatedly funded hybrid vehicles. But these weren't driven by consumer dreams of flying to work. No way. Their goal was tactical mobility.
Like for soldiers.
Exactly. Think rapid insertion or extraction across rugged, contested terrain in combat zones. Getting troops or supplies in and out quickly where roads don't exist or are too dangerous. This military thread significantly pushed concepts like modularity, VTOL capabilities, and a really rigorous approach to redundancy and safety systems into civilian projects later on. The extreme demands and comprehensive testing inherent in defense applications often accelerate innovation in ways that eventually benefit the civilian sector. And the current wave of flying cars and eVTOLs are, in many ways, a clear example of that technological trickle-down effect.
Okay, so we've charted this incredible journey of the machine itself, right? For those first clumsy hops to the dawn of regulated flight paths. But these aren't just machines. They're set to transform how we live, how we work, how we interact with our world in these deeply human ways. What does this all mean for us, the people who will be experiencing this change? Let's get into the human side.
Right, because flying cars are far more than just new vehicles. Their arrival forces us to ask a crucial question. How will they fundamentally reshape our mental models? Our ideas about mobility, about social status, about our perception of risk, and even about the very concept of public space itself. It's not just about the mechanics of flight, it's about the profound human and societal adaptations that will be required to integrate them into our lives.
And when we think about individuals, one of the first and most primal things that comes to mind is safety, right? But it's not just about the raw statistics of safety, it's about how we feel about it, how we intuitively perceive control, or maybe lack of control.
Precisely. On an individual psychological level, people don't just judge flying cars by objective safety statistics, which, as we know from commercial aviation, can be incredibly impressive. Instead, they judge them heavily by perceived control. That feeling of being in charge or not. Psychological research shows pretty clearly that when users feel less in control, think highly automated driving systems or an autopilot taking over a flying car, their trust often drops much faster than objective risk metrics might predict.
Yeah, you hear about one self-driving car crash and people freak out, even though humans crash constantly.
Exactly. Think of that visceral reaction. It means that a small number of highly publicized aerial accidents, regardless of their statistical rarity compared to ground accidents, could significantly stall mass acceptance. It could erode public trust for years. The human mind is highly susceptible to what psychologists call the availability heuristic. Vivid, easily recalled events heavily influence our perception of risk, even if those events are objectively rare.
That makes perfect sense. A single dramatic image can outweigh a mountain of data for most people.
And then there's the whole aspect of status and aspiration. It feels like whenever a truly novel mode of transport emerges, it instantly becomes a symbol of who you are, or maybe who you aspire to be.
Absolutely. Historically, every truly novel transport mode, from the very first automobiles, which were playthings for the rich, to the early days of private jets, has initially been a significant status symbol. The very sight of a Model T was once a spectacle, believe it or not. We can fully expect early adopters of flying cars and air taxi services to be elites, those with the financial means to purchase or subscribe to these premium services. And this will undoubtedly influence social signaling, creating a new and very visible marker of wealth and potentially deepening existing inequalities within cities.
Yeah, I can picture it. Seeing sleek eVTOLs regularly soaring over congested ground traffic.
Exactly. It will be a powerful and perhaps divisive symbol of who has access to this new dimension of mobility and who is literally left on the ground.
And what about the actual cognitive demands on the user? Thinking about switching from driving a car to flying a machine, even if it's mostly automated, that sounds like a significant mental leap.
It is a profound challenge, and it falls under the umbrella of cognitive load and mode switching, the mental shift required. Transitioning from ground-based driving to aerial operation, or especially between manual control and automated control, presents significant human factors challenges. Human-machine interaction, or HMI, principles are absolutely crucial here. These are the design philosophies that ensure humans can intuitively and safely communicate with and control complex automated systems.
Making sure the buttons make sense, basically.
Essentially, yes, but much more complex. Research consistently warns that mode switching, particularly between manual and automated control, can induce errors if not designed with incredibly careful HMI. Pilots, even highly trained ones, can struggle with vigilance and maintaining situational awareness during automated flight. It's a known issue. Asking a layperson, someone without thousands of flight hours, to perform such a switch under stress or during an emergency will demand incredibly intuitive interfaces and robust training to prevent potentially catastrophic mistakes.
Okay, so beyond the individual, these vehicles are poised to impact society at large in profound ways.
Yeah.
Let's think about urban form and inequality. It's easy to see how this could create entirely new types of divisions within our cities, right?
Yeah, if we connect this to the bigger picture. If flying mobility remains primarily expensive and exclusive, which seems likely at first, it could significantly privilege those who can afford vertiports and subscriptions, fundamentally altering urban dynamics. This could lead to noticeable shifts in geographic inequality. A select few might have dramatically faster, better access to jobs, healthcare, leisure, while others remain confined to increasingly congested ground transport.
Like how highways enabled suburbs, but maybe this enables a kind of vertical stratification.
That's a good way to put it. Imagine a vertical expansion, but only for the wealthy. It's a real risk that this new technology, while offering immense freedom for some, could also exacerbate existing social and economic divides within our cities, potentially creating an aerial elite with vastly different experiences of urban life than those on the ground.
And new technologies always bring new rules, both unspoken social norms and explicit legal frameworks. What about social norms and etiquette in the air? This isn't something we've really had to consider before on this scale.
That's a fascinating and, frankly, underexplored area. Just as the advent of cars once reshaped streets, how people interacted with public spaces, even created new concepts like jaywalking, the arrival of flying vehicles will create entirely new social norms and undoubtedly lead to legal disputes.
Like, who has the right of way? Can you fly over my backyard?
Exactly. Imagine the arguments over noise from a flight path directly over someone's home. Or questions of privacy when vehicles are regularly flying at lower altitudes above private property. Will there be an aerial right-of-way? What constitutes acceptable noise levels? How will communities deal with visual intrusion or the perception of surveillance from above? These aren't just technical issues. They are fundamentally about how we choose to share, manage, and interact within our common airspace. It's forcing us to redefine what constitutes public and private space in a three-dimensional world.
And new technologies almost always create new jobs while disrupting old ones. What about the labor market implications? What jobs appear? What jobs might disappear?
The labor market will certainly undergo a significant transformation. We'll see an emergence of entirely new roles. Specialized pilots, for instance, because these will likely be different from traditional fixed-wing or helicopter pilots, trained specifically for these new aircraft categories. We'll need air traffic controllers managing complex low-altitude corridors, vertiport operators, specialized maintenance technicians, a whole ecosystem.
But what about the downside?
Well, on the flip side, this could also threaten some ground-based transport jobs. Think about the potential impact on taxi drivers, rideshare operators, maybe even certain last-mile logistics roles, as a portion of demand shifts to air mobility. It's a complex dynamic with both job creation and job displacement, requiring significant workforce retraining and adaptation. The big question is, will the new jobs created offset those loss, and will they be accessible to the same populations? That's unclear.
Fine, let's not underestimate the power of how we imagine this future. Pop culture and media have shaped our expectations for decades, for better or worse, right?
Indeed. Collective imagination and media framing play a huge, often underestimated role in public acceptance or rejection of new technologies. It's powerful stuff. Positive portrayals, like the, utopian visions of the Jetsons, can increase interest and enthusiasm, making the idea seem appealing and inevitable. However, cinematic crashes, think Blade Runner or various disaster movies or dystopian visions of a surveillance-heavy sky, can amplify fear and skepticism, and that directly impacts public acceptance and political willingness to support this technology. The narrative around flying cars, whether it's one of progress and freedom or one of danger and inequality, is almost as important as the technology itself in determining its societal trajectory.
These aren't just theoretical impacts then. They're already influencing the very tangible developments happening in the industry and in policy right now. It's like a constant feedback loop between the dream, the unfolding reality, and how we all talk about it.
Okay, so this isn't just about futuristic concept art anymore, is it? We're talking about real, tangible momentum. In industry, in policy and investment, it's rapidly pushing flying cars from science fiction into, well, our potential everyday reality. The pace of change feels like it's genuinely accelerating, maybe faster than many people realize.
The regulatory landscape is definitely where we're seeing some of the most dramatic and frankly fascinating shifts. That FAA October 2024 powered lift final rule we mentioned, it is nothing short of a game changer, truly. It established a realistic, clear regulatory pathway specifically for eVTOLs and similar aircraft. And this clears up major legal uncertainty, which had been a significant barrier for years, just a big question mark hanging over everything. Now, companies can pursue official type certifications for their designs and develop robust pilot training frameworks with, actual confidence. They know what rules they need to meet.
Exactly. For commercial services like air taxis, this is a concrete foundational enabler. It signals to the entire industry that the government is serious about integrating these vehicles safely into the national airspace. It's the critical step from can it fly to can it fly legally and safely at scale. It's a profound shift from a patchwork of rules to a coherent, purpose-built framework.
And the money is certainly following that regulatory clarity, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're seeing massive investment pouring into this sector.
Oh, absolutely. Billions. With a B. Billions of dollars have flowed into companies like Joby, Archer, Volocopter, Lilium, Vertical Aerospace, the list goes on. And this isn't just venture capital for initial prototypes anymore. Significant investment is also going into the necessary infrastructure planning.
Like the landing pads and charging stations.
Precisely. We're talking about things like vertiports, those dedicated takeoff and landing sites, and the sophisticated battery charging networks they'll absolutely require. This level of investment signals a strong market belief that short urban air trips will become commercially viable and relatively soon. We're even seeing major airline orders like United's substantial investment in Archer. That shows that established incumbents in aviation are tying their future to this new mobility paradigm. They see it as a natural, maybe complementary extension of their existing networks, feeding passengers to airports, maybe.
And beyond the big players and air taxis, we're seeing early consumer products and certifications too, even if they're for more niche markets.
That's right. It's not all just about mass transit. Some flying cars, like that gyrocopter-style PAL EV we talked about, have actually moved toward limited production. They're targeting specialized, high-net-worth individuals who crave exclusivity and novelty and probably have a pilot's license already.
A very specific customer.
Very specific. And others, like Droni, received FAA airworthiness certification in 2023 for a certain class of vehicle, specifically their two-seater eVTOL. These steps are incredibly important because they demonstrate that regulatory possibilities do exist, and regulators can and will work with innovators, even smaller ones, under clear frameworks. While mass consumer scale is still distant for many, these early certifications are vital proofs of concept for the broader regulatory ecosystem. They show a tangible pathway for new players to emerge and gain official recognition.
And all of this is, of course, playing out in the public eye. The media and entertainment industries are having a field day with flying cars, shaping our perceptions as we speak.
Definitely. News cycles are constantly buzzing with test flights, announcements of new partnerships, even celebrity demonstrations, all generating significant public attention and shaping the narrative. YouTube and social media videos are particularly influential here, creating both immense excitement and, let's be honest, sometimes a fair bit of alarm when things don't go perfectly smoothly in tests.
Yeah, a shaky landing video gets 1 million views.
Exactly. And these cultural echoes feed directly into political conversations about zoning for vertiports, noise regulations, safety standards, all of it. The public discourse isn't just a passive observer, it's an active participant, influencing how quickly and smoothly this technology can integrate into our lives and communities. It's a dynamic interplay.
Okay, so with all this rapid development and public attention, it feels really crucial to separate the hype from the reality. Let's tackle some of the common myths and the very real controversies surrounding flying cars, because it's easy to get caught up in the jet's fantasy, but the truth is often far more complex and, in some ways, maybe even more interesting.
Right. This raises an important question for anyone watching this space. What are the popular myths we urgently need to debunk? And conversely, what are the actual substantive controversies that are genuinely driving the conversation and shaping the future of this technology? It's essential to have a clear-eyed view of both the promises and the very real pitfalls to truly understand where we're headed.
Let's start with a big one, a vision from so many movies. The idea that flying cars will replace all cars soon, like everyone will have one in their garage. Is that actually going to happen?
That's a definite myth, and a pervasive one at that. Realistically, flying vehicles will complement, not instantly replace ground transport. Think of them as a niche, specialized tool, not a universal substitute for your family car or the subway. The infrastructure limits for vertiports, especially in dense urban areas, the significant energy considerations for sustained flight batteries are heavy, and the high initial purchase and operating costs. All these factors will keep broad replacement unlikely in the near term, probably for a long term.
So more like an express lane for certain trips, maybe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're talking about a mobility option for specific targeted use cases, not a complete overhaul of our entire transportation system overnight. It's in addition to our mobility options, providing a new dimension, but yeah, it won't render your minivan obsolete anytime soon.
Okay, so they won't replace my minivan. Bummer. But what about safety? People often assume that anything flying is inherently more dangerous than ground-based transport. So they're unsafe because they fly. Is that a myth, or is there some underlying truth to that perception?
That's partly a myth. Flight itself, especially in regulated environments with redundant systems, rigorous maintenance, highly trained personnel, it can be incredibly safe. Commercial aviation, for example, has an astonishingly good safety record, far, far better than road travel statistically.
Right, flying is generally very safe.
However, airspace is undeniably unforgiving. Mistakes at altitude often have different and potentially more severe consequences than ground collisions. That's just physics. The type of risk changes dramatically. You're dealing with different forces, the potential for wider impact zones if an incident occurs over an urban area, different considerations for emergency landings. So, the risk profile isn't necessarily uniformly increased or decreased compared to cars, but the nature of the risks is profoundly different, and that demands exceptionally robust safety protocols, comprehensive air traffic management, and incredibly stringent certification. The margin for error is smaller.
Okay, so moving beyond those popular misconceptions, what are the real controversies? The things that are genuinely shaping the future of flying cars? Where are the substantive debates actually happening amongst experts and policymakers?
One of the biggest controversies and a source of constant tension is the balance between safety and the speed of rollout. It's a classic dilemma. Tech firms and investors are, understandably, pushing for rapid commercialization. They want to capitalize on their investments, gain market share, be first. Regulators, on the other hand, quite rightly, urge extreme caution. The FAA, EASA, others, their mandate is safety above all.
Makes sense.
Yeah. While the FAA's powered lift rule is a major step forward, many critical components for operational safety remain unresolved at scale. We haven't figured it all out yet. We're talking about comprehensive pilot training that goes far beyond traditional flight hours, effective and dynamic airspace management for potentially thousands of new low-altitude vehicles, robust infrastructure for vertiports, emergency response networks integrated into existing urban services, all that needs to be built and tested. Getting this wrong could have devastating consequences, not just economically, but in terms of public trust and, tragically, human lives. So the pace of deployment is a fiercely contested issue.
And with more things flying around, there's always the concern about noise and the overall environmental footprint. Electric vehicles are often touted as green, but it's not always that simple, is it? Especially with aircraft.
No, it's definitely a nuanced discussion. While electric propulsion does dramatically reduce local emissions, no tailpipe fumes, and can significantly lower operational noise compared to traditional helicopters, not all eVTOL designs are whisper quiet, especially during takeoff and landing phases when propellers or rotors are generating maximum thrust.
Right, that vertical lift takes a lot of power.
Exactly. The specific noise profile might be different, maybe more of a high-pitched hum than a low thud, but it's still new noise in urban environments. People notice new noises. Furthermore, the broader environmental impact of battery production needs consideration. From the intensive mining of materials like lithium and cobalt to the manufacturing processes and their eventual full life cycle emissions and disposal. These are significant concerns. It's a complex equation. It's not just about what comes out of the vehicle during operation, but about the entire ecological footprint of creating and sustaining this new mobility system.
Then there's the question of airspace equity and the potential for increased surveillance. If the skies above our cities become crowded, who gets to use them? And what does it mean for our personal privacy down below?
This is a major area of concern for urbanists and civil liberties advocates, and rightly so. Widespread low-altitude flight by commercial and potentially private vehicles raises serious privacy concerns regarding overflights of private property. Imagine constantly having aircraft flying just a few hundred feet above your rooftop, potentially with cameras.
Yeah, that feels intrusive.
It does. This also introduces the potential for heightened surveillance, whether by private companies collecting data for commercial purposes, flight patterns, maybe imaging, or by public entities for security monitoring. Who ultimately controls these flight corridors? Is it corporations driven by profit, maximizing routes and efficiency, or is it democratically accountable public agencies tasked with protecting the common good, balancing access with privacy and noise? This is fundamentally a political and ethical question, one that will likely lead to intense legal and societal debates. It forces us to redefine the boundaries of public versus private space in 3 dimensions.
And on the ground, literally, there are going to be battles over where these things actually land and take off.
Yeah.
City planners must be grappling with this already.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking about significant infrastructure and zoning fights at the local level. This is where the rubber meets the road, or rather, the landing gear meets the rooftop. Cities must rezone areas for rooftop helipads, ground-level vertiports. This isn't a simple administrative task. It involves public hearings, environmental reviews, complex planning. Communities often resist any new noise, visual intrusions, or increased traffic, even just the pedestrian traffic going to and from vertiports.
The classic NIMB effect, not in my backyard.
Exactly. Early pilot programs in dense cities will inevitably face intense public scrutiny and opposition. Public acceptance at the local level, alongside practical concerns like available space and safety buffers, will be a huge hurdle. Regardless of how safe or efficient the core technology is, without community buy-in, even the best technology can be grounded indefinitely by local opposition.
Okay, so let's circle back to a technical point, something you touched on earlier. Here's where it gets really interesting, maybe a lesser-known truth that actually underpins a lot of these challenges we've been discussing.
Yeah, those trade-offs, they are just brutal in this domain. The weight penalties required to make a vehicle truly road legal. Think about the heavy crash structures needed to pass car safety tests. The lights, the wipers, the safety equipment, the rugged tires, the durable body needed for ground travel.
All the stuff that makes a car.
Precisely. All that stuff often directly conflicts with the extreme lightness needed for efficient flight. Every extra pound on the road is an exponential challenge in the air. It directly impacts range, payload capacity, battery efficiency, everything critical for flight. This fundamental engineering paradox is why many successful designs today are choosing a strategic compromise. They're picking a lane.
So not trying to be perfect at both.
Right. They are either shaping up to be a plane with very limited roadability, essentially able to taxi slowly from a landing pad to a charging station or a maintenance bay, not drive down the highway, Or they're a dedicated eVTOL air taxi that never touches the public roads. It just flies point to point between vertiports. Very few are still seriously attempting to be a full mass-market car that flies because the engineering compromises involved typically sacrifice too much performance in one domain or the other. It's often a choice between being a decent car and a terrible plane, or a fantastic plane and a terrible car. Finding that perfect blend is incredibly difficult. And these practical challenges, these societal concerns, they're exactly what experts across various fields are grappling with right now. It's not just engineers locked away in labs, it's urban planners, legal scholars, environmental scientists, sociologists, ethicists, all trying to understand the profound implications. Let's hear what they have to say, because their diverse perspectives offer crucial insights into the complexities ahead. It's not a simple picture.
Okay, so it's easy to get swept up in the enthusiasm or, bogged down by all the concerns when thinking about flying cars. So what does this all mean to the people who are really studying, building, and regulating this future day in and day out? There's a whole spectrum of informed opinions out there, right? It's not monolithic.
Definitely not. If we look at the optimistic or maybe mainstream tech view, you have proponents in the industry, some regulators too. They argue that the new powered lift rules, combined with the rapid advancements in electrification and these urban air mobility AAM platforms, will genuinely create safe, low-emission, and truly congestion-relieving transport options, probably within the next decade. That's the projection.
A decade, that's soon.
It is ambitious. They foresee this primarily for specific, limited use cases initially. Air taxis for premium commuters willing to pay a high price, critical medical evacuations, maybe specialized cargo delivery in dense urban corridors. Companies like Joby and Archer, for instance, are very public about their claims of near-term commercial service launches. They often cite their certification progress, their extensive flight testing, and the significant investment they've secured as concrete proof points. They essentially believe the remaining engineering and operational challenges are entirely solvable, and that the market is absolutely eager for these solutions to escape ground traffic.
But on the other side, you have more cautious voices, maybe academics, urban planners, people looking at the city as a whole system. What are their primary concerns?
Absolutely. The cautious or skeptical academics and urbanists tend to highlight the significant infrastructure, equity, and governance gaps that remain. Huge gaps. They point out that widespread vertiport deployment, for example, requires massive investment and political will. Then you need reliable and truly scalable urban air traffic management systems, think air traffic control, but for thousands of low-flying vehicles. That's a huge challenge. Plus, effective and quiet noise mitigation strategies, broad public acceptance, which we've seen is tricky, and truly robust safety systems that account for human factors. They argue all this could take much longer and cost far, far more than investors currently expect. They're not just thinking about the vehicle, they're considering the entire ecosystem and its impact on the city fabric.
And the fairness aspect, too.
Yes, there's significant skepticism about promoting vertical flight as a silver bullet for urban congestion, especially if it primarily serves higher-income commuters. That could potentially exacerbate existing inequality rather than solving broader, more systemic transportation issues for the entire population. They often advocate for a more holistic and equitable approach to urban planning that prioritizes accessible public transport for everyone first. Then you have alternative viewpoints that come from different specialized fields, each bringing a unique perspective to the table. Military and defense engineers, for example, bring a unique operational and safety perspective based on their experience. They note that disciplined redundancy in design, incredibly rigorous pilot training regimes, and the establishment of highly controlled flight corridors could make certain operations safe. They do this already in controlled ways.
But civilian life isn't a military exercise.
Exactly their point. They caution that civilian systems will likely face much messier and less predictable behavior and demands than military testbeds, which operate in highly controlled, often isolated environments. The complexity of integrating with existing civilian air traffic, managing diverse pilot skill levels, especially if automation fails, and dealing with ground emergencies in dense urban areas is immense and fundamentally different from a defined military mission. And of course, environmental critics offer another important perspective, broadening the scope beyond just local air quality or noise. They focus on the bigger picture, examining the full life cycle emissions of these vehicles. This includes not just the operational emissions, which are zero locally for electric models, but particularly the intensive resource use required for battery production. Think mining of lithium, cobalt, rare earths, the energy-intensive manufacturing processes.
The whole supply chain.
The whole supply chain, exactly. They also raise concerns about potential rebound effects. For example, if reduced congestion actually makes air travel easier and faster for some, it could paradoxically induce longer commutes or more overall travel, potentially negating some of the environmental benefits. It's about looking at the entire system from resource extraction to disposal, not just the vehicle itself in isolation.
Okay, so to truly grasp the current state, let's look at some real-world examples, case studies that illustrate these different perspectives and developments. It's one thing to talk in theory, but seeing what's actually happening on the ground, and critically, in the air, brings it all vividly to life. Let's ground this discussion. All right, let's make this concrete then. Let's talk about some specific projects and companies that are making headlines and really defining the current landscape. These aren't just drawings anymore. They're machines that are actually flying, getting closer to potentially operating in our skies.
Okay, let's start with Klein Vision's Air Car from Slovakia. We mentioned it briefly. This is a prime example of a true car that becomes a plane. It famously demonstrated those inter-airport flights back in 2021, transforming on the tarmac by folding its wings and tail, then taking off like a conventional aircraft.
That transformation sequence is really something.
It is. It drew significant public attention and was a powerful proof of technical feasibility for the concept of a roadable aircraft, a vehicle that genuinely transitions between two modes. However, it's important to remember that its broader certification for widespread use and its general availability remain limited. It's not something you can just buy yet. It showcases the niche nature of some of these developments and the huge hurdles still faced for true mass adoption of a transforming vehicle. It's a fantastic engineering demonstrator, but it highlights the immense complexity of trying to optimize for both road and air.
And then we have PAL-V, which takes a very different approach to the flying car idea, focusing on a distinct type of aircraft altogether.
Yes, the PAL-V from the Netherlands is another fascinating example, and quite different. This is a gyrocopter-style roadable craft. It has actually moved towards small-scale production, representing a different niche viability route.
What's a gyrocopter again, exactly?
So a gyrocopter uses an unpowered rotor, like helicopter blades, but they spin freely due to airflow for lift. But it uses a propeller, usually at the back, for forward thrust. It gives it unique flight characteristics, often simpler, potentially safer in some engine-out scenarios. The PAL-V is targeting specialized users with high-cost vehicles, people who likely have both a pilot's license already and the considerable resources for such a bespoke machine. It's a reality, yes, but definitely not for the mass market. And it clearly demonstrates that the term flying car encompasses a whole variety of designs. Some are more aircraft-like, some more car-like, each finding its own specific, often exclusive, pathway to market.
And it's not just the big players or these niche vehicles getting regulatory nods, right? Smaller innovators are also making progress, which seems like a good sign for the whole ecosystem.
That's absolutely correct, and it's a really important indicator of regulatory maturity and accessibility. Doroni Aerospace is an important example here. This company received some form of FAA airworthiness recognition in 2023 for a certain class of vehicle, specifically their H1 two-seater eVTOL. This is significant because it shows that regulators can and will work with smaller innovators under these new, clear frameworks. It signals a viable pathway for new players to enter the market.
So it's not just a closed shop for the giants.
Exactly. It demonstrates the flexibility and responsiveness of the regulatory bodies to new technologies, which is crucial for fostering broad innovation beyond just the heavily funded giants. It suggests that if you meet the safety standards, regardless of your company's size or fund level, there's a path forward. That's encouraging.
But the big push, the real commercial momentum that we see making headlines, that seems to be coming from the dedicated air taxi companies, right? Those focus purely on urban air mobility, not road travel.
Absolutely. Companies like Joby, Archer, Lilium, and Vertical Aerospace, these are the dominant players in the emerging air taxi market. No question.
Yeah.
These are the ones truly aiming for scale in urban environments. That's their entire business model. They've secured major airline orders, like we mentioned, United's substantial investment in Archer, and they've attracted significant investment from various sources of automotive companies, tech giants, sovereign wealth funds.
Big money's betting on them.
Big money. This demonstrates incumbent aviation interest and the potential they see for rapid commercialization of dedicated air taxi services under the new powered lift rules. These companies are focused on point-to-point urban air mobility rather than roadable vehicles. They aim for high-volume, potentially automated or semi-automated routes that can ease congestion in specific high-demand corridors. They are very much at the forefront of translating that regulatory clarity into commercial opportunity, often planning initial services in major global cities like New York, York, Los Angeles, London, Dubai, Paris, often targeting dates within the next few years, like 2025 or 2026. So as these diverse examples show, development isn't uniform across the board. The approach to flying cars and advanced air mobility varies significantly, and it depends heavily on where you are in the world, influenced by different regulatory environments, urban densities, cultural contexts, and even national strategic priorities. It's a global phenomenon, but with very local flavors.
Yeah, it's fascinating how different regions receive and adapt to new technologies. Flying cars are certainly no exception. What does this all mean for a global rollout? Will it look the same everywhere, or are we going to see distinct regional flavors and challenges emerge?
Oh, it's a critical point because cultural and regulatory contexts matter enormously. It won't be one size fits all. In the United States, for instance, you have that recent regulatory progress with the FAA powered lift rule. You have heavy private investment and a large potential market for premium mobility services. So the U.S. is definitely a key battleground for early deployment. We see companies like Joby and Archer aggressively pursuing FAA certification right now.
But it's not all smooth sailing.
Not at all. Local, not in my backyard, NMBY opposition regarding noise, visual intrusion, safety concerns, and zoning. That's a huge factor. Plus, you have fragmented municipal rules across different cities and states and varying levels of public skepticism. Getting local communities and city councils on board for vertiport construction is often proving harder and slower than getting federal regulatory approval for the aircraft itself. Local politics is key.
Okay, so a top-down federal framework exists, but those local hurdles could still slow things down considerably. What about Europe then? With its denser cities and often different regulatory philosophy, particularly concerning environmental impact and maybe social equity.
Right. In Europe, stringent environmental rules and generally denser forms significantly shift the conversation. The context is different. The focus there is often more on smaller, highly regulated vertiports and maybe more specific niche use cases initially. Things like tourist flights in designated scenic areas, medical transport between hospitals, or accessing remote areas where ground infrastructure is lacking or difficult. Many EU countries emphasize comprehensive safety and environmental life cycle assessments right from the outset. It tends to be a more cautious, perhaps more thoroughly vetted approach to integration.
So maybe slower, but potentially more integrated.
Potentially, yes. For instance, companies like Volocopter are testing in cities like Paris, working very closely with local authorities to address noise and integration concerns, often focusing on high-profile events like the Olympics for initial showcases to build public familiarity and acceptance.
And then when we look to Asia and the Middle East, it seems like some countries are moving incredibly fast, often with ambitious government backing and top-down planning.
That's absolutely right. In Asia, particularly in countries like Japan, South Korea, China, and also the UAE and the Middle East, you often see very strong government support, ambitious urban pilot programs, and just a rapid pace of development and planned deployment.
Any specific examples?
Sure. Dubai's aggressive push to host early commercial air taxi services is a prime example. They have plans for widespread networks and infrastructure, aiming to be a global leader. And in China, you see incredibly fast prototyping and strong municipal partnerships, for example, with companies like XPeng and their XPeng X2 vehicle and various other local eVTOL projects. These regions often have densely populated megacities facing huge congestion challenges and governments willing to invest heavily in streamlined regulations to address those problems. This often leads to regionally distinct and frequently accelerated rollouts, driven by a combination of national ambition, urban pressure, and perhaps a greater cultural willingness to embrace new technologies quickly.
Okay, but what about less resourced countries? Do flying cars even enter the conversation there, or is it simply too far down the list of priorities given other pressing needs?
It's a really important question. For less resourced countries, while flying cars may offer immense promise for crucial applications, like rapid access across difficult terrain for medical emergencies or disaster response, imagine rapidly reaching isolated communities after a flood or earthquake where roads are gone.
That could be life-saving.
Absolutely life-saving potential. However, these regions face truly significant barriers. These include the prohibitive cost of the vehicles themselves, the massive expense of the necessary charging and vertiport infrastructure, the lack of sophisticated maintenance infrastructure and trained personnel, and the immense complexity of implementing advanced air traffic management systems in environments that may lack even reliable basic ground transport infrastructure or radar coverage. So while the potential for truly beneficial humanitarian use cases exists, the practicalities and economic hurdles are far more challenging. Widespread adoption there seems like a distant prospect without significant international support or major cost reductions in the technology itself.
Okay, so we've explored the past, the present state of the tech, the human factors, and how things look different around the globe. Now, let's try to bring it all together for a critical look at the overall balance sheet of this revolutionary technology. What are the clear upsides, and what are the really serious concerns we absolutely must weigh as this takes off? All right, let's take that step back now and look at the bigger picture. As we approach this new era of aerial mobility, what are the undeniable strengths and benefits? What does this tech promise to bring to our lives? And then, conversely, what are the serious weaknesses, the constraints, and even the potential dangers we absolutely need to consider as this technology prepares to really take flight?
Okay, let's start with the strengths and benefits. Perhaps the most immediate and off-cited is the potential to significantly reduce congestion, at least for certain routes and for premium commuters who can afford it. By opening up that third dimension for travel, flying cars offer a new layer of mobility that could alleviate some of the pressure on overcrowded roads, bridges, and tunnels. That could mean significant time savings for certain users.
The dream of flying over the traffic jam.
That's the dream, yes. Secondly, they offer the promise of faster emergency response and remote access. We touched on this. Imagine the life-saving potential for medical evacuations directly from accident sites, or rapid disaster relief efforts in difficult-to-reach areas where ground transport is slow, damaged, or impossible. That's a powerful humanitarian argument. Finally, don't underestimate the innovation spillovers. The intense R&D required for flying cars pushes advancements in critical areas. Think battery technology, energy density, charging speed. Think autonomous flight systems, lightweight advanced materials like composites, and sophisticated urban air traffic management systems. All of these advancements could benefit many other industries, from logistics and delivery drones to electric vehicles on the ground, creating a broader ripple effect of innovation.
Those benefits sound pretty compelling, genuinely impactful in some cases. But of course, there are also some very real weaknesses and constraints that temper that optimism and demand our careful consideration. What are we truly up against here?
Right. On the flip side, the weaknesses and constraints are substantial and present significant hurdles. First, there's the pervasive issue of cost and accessibility. It's a big one. High upfront purchase costs for personal vehicles, and likely significant operating expenses for air taxi services, charging, maintenance, pilots, vertiport fees, potential subscription models. All this will almost certainly lead to inequality in early adoption. Access will likely be limited to a premium segment of the population, at least initially.
So not really solving traffic for everyone then?
Not initially, no. It risks creating a new, visible class divide in mobility. Secondly, the infrastructure needs are just immense and incredibly complex. We're talking about the sheer scale of what's required, not just a few showcase vertiports, but extensive networks of them, integrated charging infrastructure, specialized maintenance facilities, advanced communication systems, and crucially, incredibly sophisticated air traffic management systems capable of safely coordinating potentially thousands of low-altitude flights simultaneously in busy urban airspace. That doesn't exist yet at scale.
And building that is expensive and difficult.
Incredibly expensive, logistically complex, and as we discussed, often politically thorny to implement in dense urban environments due to zoning and community opposition. This leads to potential delays and public resistance. And let's not forget those persistent technical trade-offs. The brutal engineering compromises between weight for road safety and lightness for flight efficiency remain a challenge, impacting range, payload capacity, and the overall design versatility and performance.
And beyond weaknesses, there are outright dangers and negative externalities we need to be really clear-eyed about.
Absolutely. We must consider the potential dangers and externalities with utmost caution. Any major safety incidents, particularly air crashes in populated urban areas, could be deeply traumatic for communities. It could severely slow rollout, damage public trust irreparably for years, and have catastrophic externalities impacting insurance, regulation, investment, everything. The visual and psychological impact of such an event in a city with potential debris and ground casualties would be immense and could easily derail public acceptance for a generation.
The stakes are incredibly high in the air.
Incredibly high. Secondly, there are profound concerns about privacy and surveillance. Widespread, low-altitude travel multiplies opportunities for surveillance. both by the vehicles themselves, which will likely have numerous onboard cameras and sensors, and by the systems managing their traffic. This raises difficult questions about contested airspace above private property and could lead to significant legal and ethical battles over who can see what and who owns the air above your home or business. Then there's noise pollution. Even quieter electric designs can generate disruptive new noise patterns in cities, especially during takeoffs and landings, which are power-intensive. While maybe quieter overall than a traditional helicopter, a new persistent hum or whoosh appearing where there was none before could lead to significant community pushback. It could potentially lead to the rejection of vertiport locations by local residents, impacting quality of life for those living under the flight paths. Noise is a major local issue. Finally, there's a tangible risk of regulatory capture and deepening inequality, a subtle but important danger. There's a risk that corporations controlling the flight corridors, the vertiports, the operating systems, could exert undue influence on policy, shaping public policy in ways that favor private profit over the public good, potentially deepening existing societal inequalities rather than alleviating them. This powerful technology could concentrate power, wealth, and access unless it's very carefully managed and regulated explicitly in the public interest from the start.
Okay, let's quickly reiterate 2 key takeaways then. 2 things you should definitely walk away knowing to help cut through the noise and maybe some of the misinformation surrounding this topic. First, the idea that flying cars mean the Jetsons tomorrow, where everyone has one zipping around, that's a definite NO. Think staged, niche, premium adoption first. It's not going to be a universal shift overnight, but a gradual integration for specific uses and likely wealthier users initially. And second, the notion that no regulations exist, so it's a Wild West in the skies. That's false. The FAA issued its monumental powered lift rules in October 2024. Regulators are actively moving and creating robust frameworks for this new era of flight, focused on safety and managing integration.
And if you want to monitor this space yourself, if you're curious, want to track the real progress, here are the practical indicators experts are keeping a close eye on. First, look for certification milestones. This means actual type certificates and airworthiness approvals issued by regulators like the FAA or EASA for specific manufacturers and models. These are real, tangible steps forward that prove a design meets stringent safety standards.
Real rudder stamps, not just press releases.
Exactly. Secondly, observe city pilot programs and vertiport approvals. Local zoning decisions, community engagement outcomes, the actual construction of infrastructure. These will show whether public adoption is politically and logistically feasible in specific urban environments. Watch your local city council news. Thirdly, keep an eye on incident reports and the safety record. Early accident statistics, near-miss reports, and how regulators and companies respond to them will critically shape public trust and future regulatory responses. Any high-profile incidents will be magnified and deeply impactful. And finally, track the cost curves for batteries and maintenance. The ongoing economic viability, can they make these affordable enough to operate and maintain, will ultimately determine the scale and accessibility of this technology. How widely available and affordable can it truly become for a broader population beyond the ultra-wealthy? Economics will be key. Hashtag Outro.
Wow. Okay, what stands out to you most from this deep dive into flying cars?
After covering all that ground, or air, it's clear this isn't just about the machines themselves, right? Not just the engineering marvels that defy gravity. It's about so much more than that. It's about how we envision our future, how we choose to move through our cities, and ultimately how we choose to live together as a society.
Yeah, if we connect this to the bigger picture, flying cars are a profound mirror. They really are. They reflect our incredible technical ingenuity, our seemingly boundless capacity for innovation and problem solving. It's amazing what humans can build, but perhaps more profoundly, they reflect our social choices. Their arrival will force us to deeply consider whether mobility is ultimately a private luxury for a privileged few or a public good accessible to all, integral to civic life. They will force cities to reconcile vertical spaces, common ground, pushing us to redefine ownership, access, noise rights, privacy rights, in ways we haven't truly grappled with since the advent of the automobile reshaped our streets a century ago.
We have to decide who owns the sky above the street. Essentially, yes, and perhaps most importantly, they will test a crucial social contract. Can we build truly transformative technologies that genuinely extend freedom and opportunity, without disproportionately extending risk or exacerbating existing inequalities or creating entirely new forms of social division? That's the fundamental test. So as you go about your day, maybe looking up at the sky, we invite you to mull over these 3 critical questions. 1, Who will ultimately control low-altitude corridors? Will it be market actors driven primarily by profit and efficiency? Or will it be democratically accountable public regulators tasked with protecting the common good in public space? 2. Can truly equitable pricing models and access pathways, perhaps through subsidies, public vertiports, innovative shared ownership models, can they actually be implemented to prevent aerial mobility from becoming just an exclusive privilege of the wealthy? And 3. How will human trust and automation evolve? Especially in a future where we increasingly rely on it for critical functions like flight. How will that trust evolve if the first high-profile tragic incidents happen not safely on the ground but in the air above our cities?
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into flying cars. We hope this has given you a fresh, maybe more nuanced perspective on a technology that's literally about to take off and reshape our world in ways we're only beginning to understand. Keep thinking about these questions, keep looking up, and we'll see you next time on the Deep Dive.